Hello, in this video lesson we'll be addressing basic decision making in C++ using if statements. And these are vitally important in making decisions in any program that you write. So by the end of this lesson you should know of the comparison and logical operators available in C++. And you should also know the syntax of an if statement in C++ so that you can use it in your own code. So before we can cover the if statement, we have to go over comparison operators. Comparison operators are essential for making decisions as they allow us to come to a conclusion as to whether we should do something or not. So they do this by determining the equality or difference between values or variables. And they basically allow us to compare values with each other so that we can come to a conclusion. So here are some of the comparison operators available in C++. So we get an equal to operator, which is represented by two equal signs, and this operator basically checks if the two values are equal, and if they are, returns true. So in the example here we see that 1 is not equal to 2, so the operator returns false. The opposite to our equal to operator is our not equal to operator, which is represented by exclamation mark and an equal sign. This operator checks whether two values are not equal to each other, and if they aren't equal, it returns true. So here in the example, we can see that 1 is not equal to 2, so this operator returns true. Another operator we get is the less than operator, which is represented by an open angle bracket. This operator checks if the second value is greater than the first value, and if it is, returns true. In this example, we say that 5 is not greater than 5, so it returns false. The opposite of the less than operator is the greater than operator. This operator returns true if the first value is greater than the second value. In the example here, we see that 4 is greater than 3, so true is returned. The last two operators are a combination of the equal to operator and the less than and greater than operators. So the less than or equal to operator is basically it checks if the value on the left is less than or equal to the value on the right and returns true if it is. So in the example we see that 3 is equal to 3, so true is returned. Then we also get the greater than or equal to operator, which does the opposite, and it basically returns true if the value on the left is greater than or equal to the value on the right. So in the example we can see that 3 is in fact greater than 1, so true is returned. Logical operators are also important as they are basically used to manipulate Boolean values, which can come in handy when we are trying to come to a conclusion. So here are three common logical operators available in C++. The first one is quite simple. It's called the not operator, and it's represented by the exclamation mark. And it basically inverts whatever the Boolean value is. So if we say not false, we get true. Or if, like in this example here, we say not true, we return false. So it simply returns the opposite Boolean value. The next operator checks if both values are true, and if they are, it returns true. So if one or both of the values are false, then it will return false. So it's called the AND operator, and it's represented by two ampersands. As you can see in the examples, if both values are true, it returns true. But if any value is false, the operator will return false. The last operator is the OR operator, and it's represented by two pipes. The operator returns true if at least one of the Boolean values is true. So in the example, we see that one of the values is true, so true is returned. But in this example, we see that both values are false, so false is returned. So now that we have an understanding about what comparison and logical operators are, we can go over the if statement. So the if statement is used to make decisions based on certain conditions. And these conditions are determined using comparison and logical operators. We'll see this in an example later on. So let us take a look at the syntax of an if statement. As you can see, the if statement has three sections over here. An if block which is required and will execute if this condition is true, an else if block, which is optional, and as you only need it if you have multiple choices that you can choose between, and this will execute if the condition here is true. And then finally you also get an else block, which doesn't have a condition, and it will only execute if none of the other blocks have executed. So if all the other conditions were false, the else block gets executed. And this is also optional and you don't need one necessarily. So to make sure we properly understand how an if statement works, let's work through an example. So here we have a program that basically gets two numbers from the user, x and y, and it outputs which variable is greater, or if the two variables are equal. So you can see that we're inputting two values over here. We then have our if block, where we check if x is greater than y. If it is, we execute this code inside of the if block, and then we jump straight to the end where we return 0. If x is not greater than y, we move on to the else if block, and check if x is smaller than y. If it is, we execute the code inside the else if block, and it outputs y is greater than x. And then it jumps to the end. Finally, if both of the blocks fail, so if both of these conditions return false, we can assume that the two numbers must be equal, and hence we just execute the else block, which outputs that x and y are equal. So let's test our program with some sample input. So if we look at sample input 1, we're inputting 3 and 9. This means that x is equal to 3 and y is equal to 9. So if in the if block, we check if x is greater than y. Since 3 is not greater than 9, false is returned. So that means the code is not executed, and we jump to the next block. Here we check if x is smaller than y. Since x is 3 and y is 9, true is returned and the code inside the else if block is executed. So y is greater than x is outputted. In sample input 2, we see that x is equal to 10 and y is equal to 1. So when we get to the if statement, we first check if x is greater than y. Since x is 10 and y is 1, 10 is greater than 1, so this condition returns true, so it outputs x is greater than y. In our last set of sample inputs, we see that x and y are both going to be equal to 4. So when we reach the if block, we check if x is greater than y. Since they're both equal to 4, this returns false. So it jumps onto the else if block. Here it checks if x is smaller than y. Since they're both equal to 4, this condition returns false, and it goes onto the else block, and then just executes the code inside the else block, because we know that if x is not greater than y or smaller than y, it must be equal to y. So I know this video might have been one of the longer videos, but we really actually managed to cover quite a few important concepts that are actually essential so we can start writing our own programs.